Educational Communications and this station present Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman. On this series, we explore the effects of human influence on the Earth's ecosystems and discuss solutions to environmental problems which affect the quality of life on this planet. Environmental Directions gives you the kind of information you need to help you participate in decisions impacting your community, the nation, and the world. Now, here's your host, Nancy Pearlman.
Hello. For the next half hour, we are going to be talking about organic farming and many issues related to the standards for organic foods, as well as relationships between the families running family farms, with my guest, Mary Clark. She is an author, a photographer, and owner of Collections by Mary. She is author of Dandelion Roots Run Deep. She has been an English teacher, a caregiver for her mother, a fitness instructor, dancer, and investor. And she is a member of many organizations, including the Michigan Organic Food and Farm Alliance, as well as the University of Michigan Alumni Association. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you so much for having me, Nancy.
I listened to your book. I think I could say I read it, but with my ears. Dandelion Roots Run Deep. A beautiful, charming story of your parents, even your grandparents, and yourself having one of the first organic farms in Michigan that was really significant. But let's begin with why you call it dandelion roots.
Well, a lot of people ask me that question. That's a great question. The dandelion is a very tenacious plant, I think you might know. It's quite ubiquitous in the Midwest especially, but it's really all over the country. I realized with a piece that she wrote in the 90s, she wrote a piece called The Dandelion.
And she refers to your mother, Merrill Clark.
Yes, people get confused about that. She, my mother. When I say she, I'm talking about my mother. And she, and then I meaning me. She wrote a piece called The Dandelion in 1992. And one line was, wouldn't you take your hat off to something as gritty and determined as that? And I realized she was really writing about herself, that she was comparing herself to a dandelion and the tenacity of that plant. And so I started thinking about roots and tenacity and looking out at all the dandelions in the yard here, and that's how I came up with the title.
Your parents actually proved that they could have a viable farm without using pesticides and herbicides and make it economical. How many acres did you have, and what were they growing?
We started with 1,500 acres, and actually part of that was transferred from Illinois because my grandparents had some land in Illinois, so my dad always wanted to be a farmer. So he finally got the opportunity, so some of that land was transferred from Illinois, and they had bought a 500-acre parcel before that, so it turned into quite a large, overwhelming operation amount of land, and so they started out trying to do definitely organic, but some soybeans and hay and growing crops, and then they discovered, oh, we don't have an irrigation system, and we need to spend millions of dollars that we don't have on that. And so because of all the droughts that happened in the 80s, that still happen, that always happen, actually, they decided to get into organic cattle. And so everything became pasture and hay, and then that grew. That definitely grew over time. Because at first they just called it chemical-free beef, and it's like, well, what do you mean there's chemicals in the meat? And like, well, yes, people don't know that. They didn't know that then, and some people still don't understand. And then it became organic after the certification standards were put into place in the 90s, actually 2000. Took it till 2000.
We'll talk more about those organic standards and the problems of creating them, but let's explore more on the farm. The neighbors had farms, but they were convinced that they had to use pesticides and herbicides, which are hazardous to their health, to their animals' health, to the plants, and really don't do that much, do they?
Yeah, exactly. There's the farmer next door, next to where I'm sitting right now, is still using some sort of pesticides, and no one has any power. Not even the neighbor can go over there and say, hey, what are you using? When are you using it? How much are you using? All of these questions because of the Right to Farm Act, of course, the right to farm meaning the right to use pesticides. But yes, there's always the contiguous farmers are going to and have continued to do do things the conventional way. And they are very set in their ways and convinced that they have to do things this way or their entire business model will fall apart because the insects and the weeds will take over.
Do you think that there is any way that the companies that make these dangerous products can make some sort of product promoting and encouraging organic permaculture kind of farming without using the dangerous chemicals, and the university and governmental agricultural agencies seem to be supported by these chemical companies?
Chemical companies, yes. Yes, that's just a big conglomerate. It's just a lot of money. It's a lot of money, and it's been going on for a long, long time. And there are some alternatives because there are some organic farms out there, and they have figured out how to do things in a way that's less hazardous to people and the planet. But it hasn't been taken up on a wider scale. And of course, that would require government action of some degree to really incentivize people to do things a different way.
Your father was actually a biochemist and had been at the university institutional level, but decided that he didn't want to be part of that kind of operation. He understood the chemical problems. How did he and your mother make that change to leave the academic world and go into the farming?
Well, that's another very good question, because obviously there's a little more job security and some sort of income from those things. And so it was a very hard decision. But my dad especially was very passionate. They were both very passionate about what they wanted to do and how they wanted to do it. And my dad, especially with all the chemistry background, could read the packages and did and understood what those chemicals could do and would do over time. And he could not make the choice, obviously, to use that on his land. Yes, that was the way they were going to do it.
What was interesting was when your mother was invited to be on the National Organic Standards Board, she didn't have that chemical background. Her husband did, your father.
Right.
He would sit in the meetings and people would dread hearing him present the real data that they were refusing to confront. Apparently, even though this was a board that was supposed to create a national standard, most of the people on it were not farmers, did not know about organic growing of food. They were basically supported by the chemical industries.
Yes.
And your parents had to pay their own way to go to the meetings to present what they thought should be the correct standards.
Exactly. I'll never forget that. I mean, she had to, it was really quite onerous to try to pay. They didn't have a lot of liquid asset running around to just throw onto an airplane ticket just to fly all over the country. So, yeah, it was pretty difficult. They created a stipend for her eventually, but no one on the board was actually paid. So, yes, some of the people on the board were kind of lobbyists to a degree, and because they were trying to influence the standards to kind of make them not quite so strict, basically, so it would be easier for people to call themselves organic, not really have to stick to such a strict standard.
How did she get invited to be on the National Organic Standards Board?
Fred Upton, the U.S. representative from this district in Michigan, recommended her because he became aware of what size and the scale of what my parents were attempting to do here, and she was really good at getting out there and making herself known. So he actually recommended her. And so he's a conservative, very much so, and I thought there's hope. There's a little bit of hope, because usually it's the conservative side of the political spectrum that thinks the environment really is a tool, it's a resource, and we have to use it for economic purposes, and all of this environmental stuff is not anything we really need to think about that much.
Protecting the environment is really not conservative or liberal. Everybody should be concerned about it.
That's correct. But there are some people that just put the economics first and the environment second, and then it's got to be a way to think of them both at the same time.
As we've learned, protecting the environment is the healthiest way to maintain a good economy.
Exactly.
Have the standards gotten stronger and better? Because I know that when I go to the market now, there's so many words used like natural. What does that mean? People are using organic when they don't meet a particular standard because they know people are being more concerned about their health and what they're putting into their body. And so it's very, very difficult now to know what truly is a healthy product and what isn't.
Exactly. That is still the case. It has been the case and will probably continue to be the case. The consumer has to have a lot of patience and a lot of investigative nature to be able to try to interpret the labels. The standards do still have meaning. It's not like everything can just put USDA certified organic label on it because they just pay somebody and say, hey, can we put this label on here? It's better than that. It's not. But there are some corners being cut. And what I like to think is that if this company started out organic a long time ago and has been around a long time, the chances are higher that those standards are probably being adhered to. But if you've got Heinz organic ketchup, I would find that highly suspect. The Hershey's organic chocolate, I don't believe that, even if they have the label on there.
You pointed out in your very charming book, Dandelion Roots Run Deep, that organic has actually been the major way farmers have grown their crops and raised their animals for practically all of time until about 100 years ago when the chemical industry started taking over. So the argument that, it's not viable just doesn't make sense, since that's the way farming and ranching has always occurred.
Right. Really since World War II. A lot of it happened after that because they had some leftover chemicals from that war. And so I thought, okay, what can we do with all of this? And so they went back to their labs and they just kind of watered things down a little bit as far as, chemistry. But that is really when it started happening in force in huge volumes. And then we're actually using more pesticides now, I have to say, than we were when Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring. And that was a lot. That came out in 1962.
You do make reference to her book, to the Sand County Almanac, and some of the famous books in the environmental realm that pointed out what we need to do to protect our ecosystems. And I recall interviewing the person who was considered the father of the Green Revolution, and he changed his opinion, Dr. Swaminathan, to saying, no, we can't have the pesticides after all. Back in the 50s, 60s, they thought that would help feed the world. So consequently, people have realized that changes need to be made again to what we're doing in terms of being able to feed everybody. In your book, you read both words from yourself and words from your mother. I found it most interesting that your mother had written down so much of her experiences, and you shared that.
Yes.
It was a delightful way to learn about what they went through and how you reacted to it.
Yes, very much. And I've probably absorbed through osmosis, just growing up with these people, the habit, I guess it's a habit, of becoming extremely passionate about something and kind of throwing caution to the wind in a way to go after it, and then coming back and having to, okay, let's be a little more practical about this. Because it was a huge undertaking at a time when there was no real market yet for organic per se. There's no certification, there's no standard when they started. So that's why they went to that to try to get those standards. There were state standards. Michigan did one thing, Vermont did another thing, California did another thing. It wasn't uniform across the country. Like, this is organic in Texas and Vermont and Michigan. It's all the same standards. It's still contentious in some ways because some farmers are thinking, well, I do things better. I do things at a higher standard than the USDA standards. And so they don't really want to get certified because they think I'm better than that. Maybe they are. And so there are a whole other organization, the Real Organic Project, that is basically for those growers who are doing things at a higher standard.
Your stories were very enjoyable to read. We are going to talk more about organic farming with Mary Clark when we return in a moment.
Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman continues with further discussion of the world's critical ecological issues. For more information, you may call 310-559-9160 or go to www.ecoprojects.org. Now, Here's Nancy.
I'm speaking with Mary Clark. She is author of Dandelion Roots Run Deep. Your book is a love story, truly, between you and your mother. You cared for your mother when she got Alzheimer's. She realized her memory was going. She wrote down so much so that you wrote some of the story, but you read her writings. Can you describe what you decided to use and what you decided not to use?
There was all of the background with her mother that she had kept. That was another place where the title came from, The Roots, because I realized this is a generational story. She kept that writing from her mother, and then I still had it. It was there. So she had put that in there, so I integrated it, and I realized that that background for her was a lot of what made her who she was, still is, she's still alive, and then it influenced the growth of the passion, the commitment that it took to have this organic farm was based on the fact that she grew up on a 26-acre farm in Elgin, Illinois. There were no pesticides or anything like that, and she just thought that was the best upbringing, the best way of life that you could possibly have.
I enjoyed hearing about the travel across the country, seeing the national parks. Who left Berkeley and traveled to see what natural areas we had here in the United States?
The reason I thought, okay, well, this is a road trip. Is this really related to organic farming? I realized, yes, this isn't a book about organic farming per se. It's about these people and why they did that. I included that because it showed characters. It grew the characters and said, here's this relationship between these two people. Here's the dynamic, how it started out, and here's what happened on this road trip. And then it was beautiful writing. It was because it was all her writing, and she wrote it during the trip. It just highlighted all these beautiful places in the country, and so I thought it's totally related to the entire ethos of the land and the environment and these two people and how their relationship really grew and got started and what they were like together on the road.
Throughout the book, there were interesting little tidbits that made one wonder what's going on. I recall, I think it was your father who commented that since he was a biochemist, he read the directions on the back of the pesticides and herbicide bags, and it said, cover yourself up, basically a hazmat suit.
Yes, right.
And people are spraying that, and they're having to use a hazmat suit, and yet then they're walking around in the fields, and the spray can go and harm the wildlife as well as the people. It didn't make sense. It was just a tiny little section, but it really showed that one has to be aware of everything around them.
Yes.
And also, I recall having seen spraying of pesticides in my travels in Africa and Asia, and they're doing it without the hazmat suit.
Wow.
It's frightening that these things are being promoted, and the people don't realize the dangers involved because of your parents' activism and your activism to try and maintain organic standards. The farm in 1995 received an award for being the best organic farm in Michigan, or was it the only organic farm?
Well, I think you're referring to, there was a headline in the Niles Daily Star in 1989, and it was Clark's earned distinction of first-level organic farm. That was kind of the kickoff for the best decade for organic, for the growth of the standards, and that's soon after that she was appointed to the National Organic Standards Board because, yes, they were at the forefront of this entire movement of doing things the right way.
She was active, and you're active in many nonprofit activist organizations trying to encourage organic farming, whether or not it's the Michigan Organic Food and Farm Alliance or the Cornucopia Institute. How effective are these? Are they making a big difference? Because I know decades ago when I did a show on organic farming in California, it was just a struggling industry.
It kind of ebbs and flows, because the government changes, people change in and out, and, the popular ideas about the environment, it seems to be almost like trendy and then not trendy, and it just goes in and out. But right now, the Michigan Organic Food and Farm Alliance, for example, has not really grown a lot over the last decade or so. It is really hard. It's a small group, all volunteer, and so it's hard. We do some farm tours, and we do this organic intensive at Michigan State University every year. The attendance is pretty much the same, just the same, not a whole lot, not a few, but it's been steady for the last few, probably decade.
I thoroughly enjoyed listening to the book. You read it beautifully. It's on audio. You can also get a hardback copy. How do they contact you? And your website is collectionsbymary.com. You're owner of Collections by Mary. What are the other collections?
Well, I do some photography and the books. Those are the two collections, basically. I'm always collecting more and I'm putting it out there. It is Collections by Mary, MERRY.com. Actually, my name is based on my mother's name, Merrill, MERRILL. So that's why my name is what it is.
So the website is COLLECTIONSBYMERRY.com.
Yes, correct.
I listened to it in just a few hours. It's not a long book, but it covered so many decades of connections with your family, with the farm, what went on, what's going on, a whole variety of stories within stories.
Yes.
When you were putting it together, what moved you the most in reading your mother's writings and in what you wanted to tell the public about organic farming?
All of it. How the book starts out, those two pieces, those were the most moving pieces, I think, that I worked with and thought about the most. I think just the beauty of her writing and what was at the heart of it, where it was coming from, and then how to interweave that spirit at the heart of her writing into the whole entire book. And it starts with dandelions, it ends with dandelions, because the piece about the dandelions begins the book, and then the end, I'm planting dandelions.
What moved you the most when you read your mother's writing?
All of it. Just all of it. And then I really loved the road trip because she was writing as she was driving. That's just like her. A woman multitasking on the road, trying to write a book while she's driving. Just her ongoing, never-ending, abiding belief and commitment to what she was doing.
Your mother was a leading activist in trying to get organic more common and used. And she was part of the ecofeminist movement. I remember helping coin that phrase decades ago. I found that in doing environmental activism, we also had to fight to be heard as women, and that our voice was equal to that of men. How did she and you define ecofeminism?
I did mention ecofeminism once in the book, and I don't know if she really thought of herself that way necessarily. I think she just thought she was an environmental activist, was a woman. And of course, she was very much a feminist, even though she didn't talk about feminism as much as I think about it, or I talk about it myself now. But a lot of women were dismissed all through history because they were women and they were just talking about the trees and the flowers and the gardens, and isn't that nice? So the ecofeminism, the theory behind it is that women are treated like the environment and men just are looking at them as just another resource to kind of use for their own purposes. Yeah, so she was definitely not somebody who was going to be used for anybody else's purposes but her own, what she believed in.
I was saddened to learn that you actually sold off some of the land on your farm. Mm-hmm. I'm here in Southern California. I grew up in Orange County when it was orange groves and walnut groves, and none exist anymore. It's wall-to-wall housing and malls and highways and roads, and they're doing the same thing to Riverside County. The farms are disappearing. Where are we going to get our food if we don't maintain the agriculture?
This land that we sold is still agricultural. It's not housing, and it probably always will be. This is not a high population area. It's not even very close to any high population areas. There was some debt and some things, and my brothers were getting older, and there was, just like I said, in the beginning it was very difficult. There was high interest rates when they first started, and there was just a lot of overhead and ongoing expenses that never stopped. So when my father passed on in 2006, we we had to do some reorganization.
Your book focuses on the human story, the human relationships and actions, but occasionally you threw in a statistic or two. How much organic farming is going on in the country, and do you see it expanding fast or slowly?
That is another very good question. Really only about 1% of all of American farmland is being farmed organically. There's also this thing called regenerative, which is basically, it's not really organic, but they're trying to do something about soil fertility because they've realized finally what all of this synthetic fertilizers and chemical pesticides have done to the soil. Over the last 20 years, it depletes it. It kills fertility, and so they finally decided we have to do something about the soil. And there isn't enough. It's trying to increase, but some of the increases have come from those standards kind of being a little bit watered down here and there so that more of the bigger corporations can get in on it and just say, yes, this is organic. And some people call it fake organic, and that's why there's still a National Organic Standards Board, and these people go back and they fight about these things every year.
For those who don't wish to go to the corporate stores, farmers markets have become so common here in the Los Angeles area. There's a different farmers market in every neighborhood every day. When I go to them, they're almost all the organic farmers selling their products directly to the consumer.
Yeah, those are great. I went there into them as much as I could.
Your father and mother actually had a sign out saying, food's available, you can come pick it, just knock on our door, we'll sell it to you.
Right. Yes, because it's very hard to have, when you're out in a rural area, and kind of hard to have regular hours for a little roadside farm market where we were selling our meat right across the highway right here for a number of years. But there would be long times when no one would show up, and it's like trying to figure out what kind of hours you should have. It's very difficult. So for a while, we did actually go into some of the Chicago farmers markets, a lot of the farmers markets, whatever we could get to. But, it's a hike. It's really hard for these farmers to transport all of that food, to set it up. It's really a lot of labor that goes into those farmers markets.
We've been talking about organic farming in the United States, but it has taken off in other countries like Australia. Where else other than subsistence farming, which has almost always been organic unless they're being sold a bill of goods, as we might say, by the pesticide companies, which puts them generally in debt in these poorer countries. Where is the movement internationally?
I haven't been following every single country and their standards, but I do know that the European Union has higher organic standards than the U.S. does. Also, the U.S. actually imports a lot of what winds up with a USDA organic label on it, but that's one of the things that they are talking about at the National Organic Standards Board is the influx of product from other countries that undercut the prices and undercut the standards, because I don't believe there are any USDA inspectors in these other countries keeping an eye on how these things are being raised. In Turkey, for example, they're sending in almonds. They wind up on the shelf and they're calling them organic, and they're not really organic. I do know that other countries do have higher standards.
We certainly do have to inquire about whether or not these products really are organic.
Right.
I thoroughly enjoyed all the stories that you shared with us, and I urge everybody to read or listen to your book, Dandelion Roots Run Deep, and learn about the efforts to get into organic farming and to encourage others and to create the standards that we need so desperately. I want to thank you so very much for sharing the stories. Thank you for being my guest.
Thank you, Nancy.
I have been speaking to Mary Clark, who is owner of Collections by Mary and who is an author and photographer. I'm Nancy Pearlman. Thank you very much for joining us, and do tune in again next week.
If you would like free information about these environmental issues, go to www.ecoprojects.org or call 310-559-9160. Environmental Directions with your host, Nancy Pearlman, is a community affairs program of the nonprofit organization Educational Communications and this station.